February 1st, 2026, the Catalina Foothills, a quiet, affluent suburb of Tucson, Arizona. Sheriff's deputies arrive at a home near East Skyline Drive and North Campbell Avenue, responding to a welfare check after an 84-year-old woman failed to show up for her scheduled virtual church service, something completely out of character for her. What they find inside that home will launch one of the most closely watched missing persons investigations in recent American history, not because of who the victim is herself, but because of who will spend the next 100 days standing in front of television cameras, begging the world for her mother's safe return. Nancy Guthrie was last seen by her family the previous evening, January 31st, at approximately 9:45 at night. By morning, she was gone. Investigators would later determine that she did not leave on her own. Evidence at the scene, drops of blood found on the front steps, later confirmed through testing to be hers, told a story that ruled out any possibility of a quiet, voluntary departure. Sheriff Chris Nanos of the Pima County Sheriff's Department stood before reporters in the earliest days of the investigation and said plainly that a crime had been committed inside that home, that this was not a wandering, elderly woman, not a misunderstanding, but an abduction.
The investigation is
What makes Nancy Guthrie's case different from so many others that quietly fade from public attention is her daughter, Savannah Guthrie, the co-anchor of NBC's Today show, a familiar face in millions of American households every single morning. Within days, the disappearance of a private citizen in a quiet Tucson suburb became a national story, covered not as a footnote, but as a lead headline, precisely because the woman missing was the mother of someone the country already felt they knew. 10 days into the investigation, the FBI released doorbell camera footage recovered from Nancy's own home, footage that would come to define the public's understanding of this case. The video shows a masked figure approaching the house in the early morning hours. Average build, somewhere between 5 feet 9 and 5 feet 10 inches tall, wearing dark clothing and carrying a stuffed black backpack, a holstered weapon visible at their side. At some point, the figure appears to notice the camera and strikes it with a closed fist, an act investigators believe was meant to disable the device, though it continued recording regardless. It is the only visual record the public has ever seen of the person law enforcement believes is responsible for what happened that night. And despite its release, the individual in that footage has never been identified. Within a week of the disappearance, multiple media outlets, rather than the family directly, began receiving what purported to be ransom notes, communications law enforcement would later describe as highly unusual, specifically because of how they were delivered. Former FBI agents who reviewed the situation publicly noted that legitimate kidnappers almost always communicate directly with the family or through law enforcement channels, not by mailing letters to television stations and newspapers, a detail that added another layer of confusion to an already disorienting case. The first note demanded a ransom of several $1 million, reportedly $6 million, to be paid in Bitcoin, with a deadline set for 5 in the evening on February 9th. As that deadline approached, Savannah Guthrie did something few people in her position have ever had to do publicly. She sat beside her brother Cameron and her sister Annie and recorded a video message directed not at the public, but at whoever was holding her mother. "We received your message, and we understand," she said, her voice steady but visibly strained. "We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay." It was an extraordinary moment. A national news anchor speaking not as a journalist reporting a story, but as a daughter pleading directly into a camera lens, hoping the message would somehow reach the one person capable of ending her family's agony. The deadline passed. No exchange occurred. No further communication followed in the way the family had hoped. 8 days later, Cameron Guthrie posted another video. his frustration now layered over the original fear. "Whoever is out there holding our mother, we want to hear from you," he said. "We haven't heard anything directly. We need a way to communicate with you so we can move forward." The silence that followed each deadline became its own kind of cruelty, a family left to interpret meaning from an absence of response. On February 24th, 24 days after her mother vanished, Savannah Guthrie said something publicly that no parent or child ever wants to have to say about someone they love. She acknowledged that her mother may already be gone, that she may have already gone home to the Lord that she loves, as Savannah put it, while also announcing that the family was offering a personal reward of up to $1 million for any information leading to her mother's recovery. "Somebody knows," she said. "We are begging you to please come forward now." What the public did not know at the time, and would not learn for another 4 months, was that a second note had also been sent to media outlets in February, one whose contents had been deliberately kept from public release. According to multiple sources who later spoke with NBC News, this second note made no demand for payment and offered no apology for the abduction itself, but it did contain an expression of regret, stating that Nancy Guthrie had died shortly after she was taken. Investigators who reviewed both notes came to believe they were potentially legitimate communications from whoever was actually responsible, a conclusion law enforcement chose not to make public for months, reportedly to preserve the possibility that further contact might still come from the person or persons who sent it. That decision, to withhold the contents of the second note from the family's full understanding of the public narrative, became its own story when NBC News finally reported its existence on June 22nd, nearly 4 months after it was first received. The revelation forced Savannah Guthrie back in front of cameras on the Today Show itself, this time not delivering a message to a kidnapper, but responding, through tears, to news her own viewers were only now learning. "We are in agony," she said. "Please do the right thing. We love our mom and will never stop looking for her, ever." As of this telling, more than 100 days after Nancy Guthrie vanished from her home in the Catalina foothills, she has not been located. No suspect has been formally identified or charged. A tip received by a volunteer search group near the U.S.-Mexico border in June led to an unsuccessful search effort one of many leads investigators have chased and ultimately set aside. The FBI continues to analyze mixed DNA recovered from the scene, including a hair sample alongside cell tower data, roadside surveillance, and digital forensic evidence gathered in the months since. Sheriff Nanos has stated publicly that he believes an arrest will eventually be made, though he has not disclosed what investigators believe the motive to be. For Savannah Guthrie, the case exists in a strange and painful dual reality, a national news story that she covers from the same anchor desk she has occupied for years, and a private family tragedy that follows her home every single night. She has described her mother as someone who lived a life of integrity, a truth teller, someone curious about everything, someone her own children still need, regardless of what the investigation ultimately reveals. Whatever the final answer to this case turns out to be, it remains, as of now, unresolved. A combined reward exceeding $1 million still standing, a family still waiting, and a community still hoping that somebody, somewhere, finally comes forward.